What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Always Hope podcast, a production of Willwood's Faith in Marriage. This is Dr. Mario Sacasa, and I pray that today finds you in a good place. By now, you know that I love movies and good storytelling. So joining me on the show today to talk about the necessity of creating high-quality stories for kids are two of the creators of the popular Saints Alive podcast. Alex and Melissa Dee, together with their friend Tanner, started Saints Alive, which is a radio drama podcast about the lives of the saints that is geared towards kids. Now, I have to confess that my youngest son is a fan of the podcast, so I got serious street cred at home when I told them that I was interviewing them. We recorded this conversation back in December, and we had a delightful and free-flowing discussion on a wide range of topics. Alex and Melissa share their journey of starting the podcast with their friend Tanner, winning the $100,000 prize from the OSV Challenge, learning how to navigate differences in desires and life goals as a couple. It's a really beautiful time when they share that in the podcast. The importance of having hard conversations, the need for good storytelling, and they share a bit about their creative process. After listening to this episode, if you think it can help one person or you think somebody you know could benefit from it, well, please, don't be a hoarder. Pass it along. If you enjoyed the show, then I'm sure somebody else will too. Do you have thoughts about the episode you'd like to share with me personally? Join the conversation on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. So let's get into this discussion with Alex and Melissa Dee. Alex and Melissa Dee, welcome to the Always Hope podcast. How are you guys doing today?
We're great. Thank you so
great.
much for having us.
Yes.
Oh, praise the Lord. I guess I should tell the listeners that there's a third person on your side also that we should be welcoming to the show as well. And that's baby Mia, who you're holding right now. Is that right?
Yes. If you hear any squeaks or cries, that is from our newborn.
Well, I can't believe you guys are doing this. I mean, she's only 3 weeks old or something? Is that what you said?
3 weeks.
3
Yep.
weeks and 2 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
God
I don't
bless
know.
you guys.
We were just saying before we started that life is crazy, and we thought about putting things on hold, but we were like, you know what? It's always crazy. So we're just gonna keep going. Baby in tow.
Yeah.
Well, I know those first couple weeks after the baby's born, at least for me, I didn't know what time of day it was. I always felt like it was just kind of everything's kind of disjointed. And so thank you guys. I mean, it is, I guess, 1:00 in the afternoon Eastern time. So I'm happy that we're able to at least connect and have this conversation. So if baby Mia cries, hey, it adds to the flavor of the interview, and we'll roll with it. All right. It's a family friendly show, so I won't drop any F-bombs. Okay. To this. Okay. So, well, first, as we kind of get started, I just want to tell everybody, congratulations. You guys are some of the recipients of this year's OSV Challenge. How does that feel to have won the big prize? What is that like for you guys?
It's pretty, it's still hitting us, honestly. It was a lot of hard work. And so it feels great to have that hard work be paid off and realized. Unfortunately, literally right on the day we won, we both got COVID.
Oh no. Oh my
Well,
gosh.
Melissa got COVID first, and then I got COVID 5 days later, but it was just this whirlwind of excitement and then sickness and then COVID fog.
And then we had a baby.
And then we had a baby.
But no, it was a really, for anybody that's thinking of entering the challenge, I could not encourage them enough, because it was really difficult, and they just ask you the hard questions over and over and over, and they make you really hone in on your idea, and just bring it back to Christ every time. What is he asking of you? So it was great, and we met so many great people, and I just feel so inspired by how many amazing Catholic entrepreneurs and artists and everything are out there. It's exciting.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Well, it's just a little bit more about that process. What was that like for you guys to enter the challenge, to kind of walk through it? I have interviewed a number of other people that have been involved with it, and they all say something very similar. But I'd love to be able to just hear from you, what was that like? Because you have this idea of this podcast, and your podcast is already out in the world, and people are listening to it. And so being able to manage the production of Saints Alive together with the OSV Challenge and everything that's being asking, together with whatever normal jobs you may have in family life and everything else, what was all of that like for you for those few months?
Yeah. So I'm a nurse, and I'm not working right now, but I was working this past winter, and then Alex has a full-time job. And so all of the work was really done. A lot of sleep was sacrificed. There just wasn't any way around it, like there just wasn't enough time. But I don't know, but I forget where I was going with that.
No, I think like the main thing that we learned throughout the entire process was that you have to set aside time to, even in the midst of busyness of like goal making and chasing dreams of winning this challenge, like we had to set aside time to still be just ourselves and like be husband and wife. I bet there's a lot of families that enter the challenge like doing family businesses, and I'm pretty sure we all had similar struggles of being like, it's hard to know when to turn off the entrepreneurial discussions and the strategies of like how we're going to get things done, because you're with each other all the time. And so we definitely had a learning curve to go through that. We had a lot of early kind of like we learned how to disagree better about business stuff without getting heated. and we were already starting to go through that just with the podcast itself, because like when we started Saints Alive, it was you can tell in our first episodes the difference of what it sounds like now. And that was the process of unfolding that at the same time as going through OSV, and OSV was helping us challenge our preconceived notions as well. So it's definitely just like a juggling act of going through the learning curve together and not getting mad at each other when you have disagreements.
Yeah.
Well, you can get mad at each other, but not killing each other is the operative word. You're going to say something, Melissa.
That's the key. No, it just, I don't know. We started Saints Alive, and we have been really humbled this whole time just by the response. And I think a huge part of the OSV challenge was not just, they didn't just support us, but they challenged us to more. Like, like this isn't just a little kids podcast. Like, what are your hopes and dreams for this? So it was kind of a part-time job, but it was so worth it. And yeah, we're so grateful.
I think it was more than a part-time job.
It sounds like it was more than a part-time job just to get and make it all happen.
Right.
Okay, so right there, what you were saying, you said was really beautiful, and I'd love to just maybe have you guys say a little bit more about it. But let me ask you real quick: how long have you guys been married?
3 years.
3 years. Okay, so you're jumping into everything. You just get married, have a 2-year-old, have a 2-week-old, start a podcast, win the OSV challenge. It's been a busy 3 years for you guys. It's been a lot. That's congrats, that's fantastic to be able to do all of that at the same time. But I love what you were saying, both of you, in terms of just you have these ideas and these dreams and these hopes and these visions of what you would want to do together, but then actualizing that sometimes is a little bit more challenging than just what our preconceived notions are. And it's in that space where maybe even though you've talked about it, Alex, you had a certain idea, and Melissa, you had a certain idea about the particular episode or this particular thing. And it's like navigating how to be able to have honest conversation without, leading always into friction. And I think that's a real challenge for a lot of young couples, even ones who aren't having kids just, right out of the gates or trying to apply for $100,000 grant prizes. It's that, but that's a real learning curve that all couples have to kind of navigate, is to say, well, how do we really discern together? How do we really make decisions together? How do we really discuss and talk about what I'm seeing and what you're seeing, and how do we really come to agreement on those things? I think that's a real challenge for many couples.
Yeah. I think we could. Were you thinking what I'm thinking about?
I think probably.
So
I get the sense there's a story that's about to be told. So
yeah, she tells it better, but I'll just like start us out here, and then you pick in. But so we dated long distance our entire dating relationship, and then I proposed to her. I was living in LA and she was living in New Hampshire.
Wow, that's long distance.
Yeah, that's pretty much as far as you can go in the continental United States. So I proposed, and then she moved out to LA, and we definitely fell into just like not talking everything through with our plans. And I'll have you pick it up from there.
Well, we didn't get in a single fight while we were dating, and we were just like, oh my gosh, we're just so in love that we don't fight, you know? And then all we did was fight through our engagement. Like that,
Oh,
it was
mercy.
like this constant. We just didn't talk through a lot of the big things. And Alex is an actor and filmmaker. I'm a nurse, and I wanted to be back home. He wanted to keep pursuing film, and we just didn't agree. So we like to say that we learned how to fight well during our engagement. And when I say fight well, I mean like talk to each other, love each other, you know, not be defensive. And we're still learning it. But
I want to say though, like I think that it's very easy for engaged couples, like for couples are about to be engaged, to think that they talked about all the big stuff, but then when engagement happens, all of a sudden, this whole floodgate opens, all these things you didn't think about.
Yep.
It becomes real.
It becomes
you know?
very real.
Yeah.
And so we thought we had talked about really big, important stuff.
Yeah.
But like, I think it's more in like the fantasy land. And then like getting down to the practicals of like, okay, where are we going to live?
Right.
You know, like that's pretty big.
Yeah.
That's a hard conversation, especially when you are both on opposite sides of the country. You can't just be like, well, we'll just live in Omaha. That's halfway. You know, between both. That's the compromise. We'll just meet in the middle. You just can't meet in the middle always. You know, sometimes they require real conversations. So, well, praise the Lord. That's great to hear that you guys are navigating these things, having these discussions, and that the fruits of it are certainly within your own relationship. The fruits of that will bless your children. But then the fruits of this have also benefited this creative endeavor that you guys have been undertaking. So tell us a little bit about the Saints Alive podcast, and how'd you come up with this idea, and how do you just kind of make it happen?
Yeah. So that's kind of the second part of that story. So we were living in LA, we were married, and we were still just struggling because Alex wanted to stay in LA and pursue acting and filmmaking, which, you know, it's hard to do outside of there. Yeah. I can be a nurse anywhere in the country, but I didn't want to be. I wanted to be back home with family. And we just had this struggle of, you know, me thinking like he's selfish, he needs to give this up and just, you know, just lay down everything, and him wanting to fulfill the desires that God put on his heart, but also wanting to provide for me. And then we had a baby in March 2020, right when COVID hit. Wow. And we were stuck there for a few months. And it was really through the rosary. We had a lot of free time on our hands, but we just started praying it as a couple every day. And it just opened both of our hearts. So he was able to see like what we needed as a family was to get out of LA and have the supportive family, especially with kids. And I was able to see that, you know, these desires and passions that he had weren't selfish, but they were placed there by God. So right before we left LA, I said, I don't know what your career is going to look like. And he got me out. I was like, okay, thank goodness we're getting out. And I said, I don't know what it's going to look like, but I promise you, I will support you in this, and I'm going to be by your side. And I don't know what that looks like. And that's really where Saints Alive was born from, was that creative endeavor of him wanting to tell stories, and how do we do that from here, and let's just do it. Yeah.
I mean, because like my call to film and storytelling in general, it was never, I always was pretty grounded in the fact that I didn't want to do this, you know, I wasn't looking for fame. I wasn't looking for this to be about me. I like performing. I love storytelling. I love film. And so, yeah, there's some part of me that wants to be in front of people. But storytelling for me, it's just like, there's some call in my heart that I can't get out. And I've asked God so many times, like, God, if this isn't going to serve you, then take this out of me. Because it's hard. I really don't want to do it, because it's really, really hard.
Right.
If there's something else you want me to do that's going to be life-giving for you, and also lead, you know, my family and more people to heaven, like, tell me what you want. But he hasn't removed this call. And so actually, right as we were in LA, right when COVID hit and James was born, I booked my first like supporting role in a pilot.
Wow.
And for actors that are listening, you know that's like a big deal.
That's a
Now,
huge deal.
yeah. This pilot wasn't like, I don't know. I know they did work on it, and I know that it's out there somewhere, but I don't know if it ever got optioned. But it was a huge deal for me, and I had to turn it down. Like I had to turn it down. It was I wasn't gonna risk what was going on. It was like that crazy time when no one knew what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a bit of a turning point of realizing I have to make sure that I'm orienting this call in a way that is going to be serving my family.
Hmm.
And when we moved back, I was just like really itching. I was like, I need to like God, like, I need to put this to work. Like there's this drive in me that's just it's not being channeled, and I need to know what to do. And actually it was a conversation that I had with my mom. And she has been like always on my case of, making saint stories.
Hmm.
And I was like, Mom, I would love to make a saint film, but they're all period driven pieces. It's like hundreds of thousands of dollars just to do a short film if you want to do that right.
Right.
And then she was like, well, why don't you think about radio drama? And then that got me thinking and got Melissa thinking. And then
it all kind of culminated. Our best friend flew out on our anniversary that year.
Mm-hmm.
And
Tanner Kleena, who's the third.
Yeah, so there are three of us on Saints Alive. So there are three co-founders. So our best friend Tanner, and then Alex and I. And Alex and Tanner were just doing their usual conversation, which was like, I want to do this. I want to tell this story. We gotta,
do this for the
culture. We did this. And I was finally like, you guys, if you want to do it, we have to do it. Like, let's just do it. So that's how it started. It was a conversation in the kitchen pantry.
Hey.
Well, speaking of, you have a fan here. So sorry, this is Jude. Here, Jude, why don't you put this on?
Hey, Jude.
Put this on right here. So this was a little pre-planned interruption into the interview. You got to speak it to the microphone, June. So you got to learn how to do this here.
Hi.
Hey.
How are you? You recognize his voice?
Oh, do you recognize my voice?
Yeah.
I don't have my narration voice on right now, but yeah, this is the
Can you do your introduction by memory?
Let's see. Yeah. Not all of it, but let's see. Welcome to Saints Alive. Did you know that you were called to be a saint?
I can hear it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for listening.
So this is my 8-year-old to tell the audience also, who can't see what we're doing right now, but this is a planned interruption into the podcast. I
love it.
And this is my 8-year-old Jude. Say hi, Jude.
Hi.
Hi, Jude.
And he is a listener of Saints Alive and
Awesome.
and loves storytelling in general. And he's got a few favorite podcasts, and your guys is one of his.
Awesome.
And so when I told him that I was going to be interviewing you guys, his eyes lit up, and he actually has a question. And I know you guys have done a Q&A with listeners before, so I'm stealing your idea and putting it on my show. So so here's Jude. He has a quick question for you, and then we'll get back to our regularly scheduled interview.
Okay.
Great.
So I think it was the Padre Pio one.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? When the Padre Pio, when he like floated up and like went to like the person that was like flying in the fire jet to tell him to turn around, was Mary and her grandfather, were they like real people, and did Padre Pio actually like float up and tell somebody to turn around?
Mm-hmm.
So that was all real. So we don't know about Mary and the grandfather, but the young pilot that turned into a grandfather one day really did fly the plane and really did see Padre Pio in the sky and really did turn that plane around. It's all real.
So that's actually in Saint Padre Pio's Positio, which is like this big book document that the church puts together, and all of these stories are basically researched and interviewed with the actual people to see what happened and investigated, and that story is in there. So
isn't that crazy?
It's pretty amazing.
Whoa.
I know. It's all real.
Yeah.
That's
But yeah,
cool.
Mary and her grandfather, so they were those people, those characters, those aren't real. They're we developed those characters to help tell the story of the actual story of Saint Padre Pio.
Oh.
Yeah.
Pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for telling me.
You got
Yeah.
it, Jude.
Thanks for listening, Jude.
Yeah. Thank you for putting me on the spot too. I really should memorize the
I
whole
know you should
opening.
know that.
I should have it right on the spot, ready to go.
All right. You good? You got your question
Yep.
answered? You feel good?
Mhm.
All right. Say goodbye, Jude.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye, Jude.
Love you, bud.
See ya then.
That's awesome.
See ya.
That just made my week.
That was huge. That was awesome. I love it. We gotta do one of those episodes again.
So for the listeners who don't know, they need to check out the Padre Pio episode and just to fill everybody and bring everybody back into this conversation. You have to listen to that episode. You could probably hit pause and then go listen to it and then come back to the conversation, or wait till the end and you'll know the context of Jude's question. So grateful to have had him we had this staged. So he came.
That's great. I love it.
I told him, I said, you have to set your timer and come in, right at this time and then we'll get going with it. So.
I love it. You sound like a great director.
Yeah.
Well, this is actually one of the advantages. I've recently just started working from home. We just moved to Charlotte a couple months ago,
Right.
and, from New Orleans. And so being able to now have this opportunity to be able to work from home in my podcast studios at home, my kids have been so respectful when I'm interviewing or when I'm doing my counseling sessions. I do those from home also. My kids have been awesome. They've been so quiet and generous, of their time when I'm in production, doing this stuff. So I wanted to find a way of actually being able to bring them into it so they can kind of see behind the veil, what's Dad doing in there, when he's by himself talking to people, And, and so Jude did a great job. He crushed it. He was really nervous this morning. He was like, I don't know what to say. I'm like, you're not doing anything. You're just walking into my room. You've walked into 100 times. It's no big deal. It's gonna be like a FaceTime call. You're gonna ask them a simple question, and that's how it's gonna work. So,
that's great. Actually, now I'm constantly aware of people's voices. I'll be in a grocery store and be like, oh my gosh, that guy's voice. I want him on the podcast. He had a great voice.
It's a great voice.
Man, that's a good kid's voice.
Well, he'll be happy to do it. So we have the technology; we can make it happen. So
I know.
This is me being my son's, what's it,
Manager.
Publicist, manager. That's it. Yeah, manager. Trying to get him gigs at a young age. So awesome. Well, thanks guys for playing along with that for a little bit. I really appreciate it. All right, so back to what you were saying, which was really beautiful and something I really, I love the way your story is unfolding and being able to say, okay, so God's given me this desire, or multiple desires, really, Alex, kind of in your case. It's like, well, I really feel clearly that I'm called to be a husband, to be a father, discern marriage with this woman, and this is the life that God has for me. This is my vocation. This is the direction that God has for me. But at the same time, I also have this nagging interest and nagging longing to want to be creative in a very particular way, to do stories, to act, to be able to give creatively. And we set out on this mission thinking that it's going to be one way, but it doesn't quite work out that way, And then kudos to you guys, again, in those hard conversations, like you said, learning how to fight well during engagement in the beginning of marriage, but navigating those conversations in an honest way and being able to be respectful of that. And I think what I love what you said, Melissa, was that initially, it's easy to be like, well, you just need to give it up, you weren't that harsh. I know I'm being maybe exaggerating a little bit. Okay, no, you weren't. Never mind. So, you're just being selfish because you're not putting you're putting those dreams before the family, and so the fact that you guys prayed and were able to come together, in a beautiful way. And then Alex, for your heart to say, okay, well, let's take this first step. This first step is, well, I need to honor what my wife's asking and agree, not just in a, sometimes we use the word compromise in a negative sense where it's almost like, well, I'm going to scratch, I'm doing this for you now, but I'm going to hold this over your head for the next 20 years also, like waiting for the opportunity where I'm going to get paid back, for doing this. Like that's the wrong form of compromise. I'm just going to let everybody know that in marriage, that's not what we're seeking. That there's genuine freedom to say, no, this is what we've discerned and this is what you feel is best. And I've prayed about it and I've confirmed that and feel that that's what we need to do. And we make these decisions together always. While still then taking to prayer and saying, all right, Lord, like, well, where are we going? So what's the answer to this other thing, that you've put in my heart? And in his providence, it turns out that like there was an answer for that. And it just takes it just takes a little bit of time to investigate the questions, to be honest, to be patient, to let the story unfold as it needs to, and to be, again, in conversation with each other and also with the Lord. It's awesome, guys. I mean, really, like, it's a lot of stuff that I tell my couples, to work on. And here we go. Who knew this was going to be an episode? We're going to get into marriage counseling. I didn't know this is where we're going to go today, but that's the beauty of the show. We just kind of let it go wherever it needs to. So, and also shout outs to mom. We have a mama shout out here, right? Your mom being the one who's saying, "Hey, why don't you do radio? Why don't you do radio theater?"
I know.
It's fantastic.
We really should know to listen to our moms, because his mom and my mom set us up too, and it took them 10 years to get it together. But I'm like, we just have to listen to them.
Yeah, I know. I know what they're talking about.
I know.
Yeah, I have to get credit where credit is due, and it comes back from my nagging mother.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'll share in my life. I actually have to give credit to my mom. Similarly, I had a kind of a quarter life crisis in college, where I was in the trajectory of biology and medicine. And I thought, man, this is what I was supposed to do. I got to organic chemistry, realized this is not what I'm supposed to do. Like, organic chemistry is like the worst class in the history. I think it's Dante's 8th level of hell that he didn't talk about. There's like organic chemistry, and then you start moving. It's the precursor that gets you into the other rings. But it was like after that summer after taking the class, I talked to my mom and I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, this isn't feeling it anymore. And she was like, in high school, you were always the guy who your friends would talk to. Have you thought about psychology? And I was like, no, I haven't. I was like, oh, okay. Took a Psych 101 class, and that was it. Like a fish to water. Never looked back. So yeah, we'll give shout out and credit to moms all over the place. Hey everybody, this is Dr. Mario Sacasa. I'm just taking a quick break from my conversation here with Alex and Melissa Dee to encourage you to check us out at faithinmarriage.org. We have our list of 2023 married couples retreats. If you and your loved one, if you've been married for 6 months or 60 years, it doesn't matter. We would love for you to come to one of our retreats at the Abbey Retreat Center in Covington, Louisiana. St. Joseph Abbey Retreat Center in Covington, Louisiana. My apologies. Come and join us. It would be a great weekend. We can get away. We can have some intentional, meaningful conversations, dedicated time of prayer as couples. And we also just have a wonderful time. We play games and just joy. It's a great time. I don't know what to say. So check us out. Go to faithinmarriage.org. Look at the full list of the retreats. You can see that most of them are sponsored by a parish, but no worries. Go ahead and put yourself on the waiting list. Oftentimes those parishes do not fill the retreats up, and then we open it up to the general public. So again, love for you to come. Check us out, faithinmarriage.org. Click on marriage retreats, and we hope to see you and your loved one at one of our upcoming marriage retreats. So let's talk a little bit, though, just transitioning here, talking about storytelling. Okay, so Alex and Melissa, I'd love to hear your insights in this as well. But Alex, you said that's been something that's been on your heart. The need to tell stories and to be in the creative space, not just for fame, not for ego, which I know it's easy to get into all of that. But what is it about storytelling specifically that captures your imagination and is something that you're passionate about and engaging with actively?
For me, I think it comes down to, like, one of my central core, I think, tenets is like I desire to move hearts to Christ. And storytelling, cuts through so many barriers that people have around their heart and can affect them in a way that's really beautiful. It can also affect them in a way that's really detrimental.
Right.
And I just I've seen so many I think people just in our present culture today just be so hurt by just like bad storytelling and buying into these just dark lies and these stories that just like tear down instead of build up. And so for me, it comes down to I just felt this very clear call of I have always been drawn to story. At the same time, it's always been my wife is actually a master storyteller. She's much better than I am, but I am my gift is that like I'm a master at like really feeling out where a story needs to go, and actually injecting myself as an actor sometimes and feeling like, okay, is this working or is this not working? Um,
Hmm.
but all of that just comes down to like this intense desire to move hearts to Christ. Like I always felt that. I've always wanted to, yeah, just help people see his beauty and to find his love. And I think that comes down to like, that's what I want too. I really want that. Like I've been affected by so many stories. Like when I was a child, like one of the ones that I think a lot of young boys will say this, but like Lord of the Rings, just like that just like opened my eyes to like, wow, this is good and versus evil.
Yeah.
And like this is what's worth fighting for, is like the goodness in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I like learned about Tolkien's Catholicism and his just his allegories that he used in that storytelling, like it was like, I want to do that. I want to tell stories like that. And so I set out to be in Lord of the Rings really at the end of the day. But
I love it. I just have to say, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we just finished, my 12-year-old just finished The Lord of the Rings. And
wow.
in the Sakasa household, if there's movie adaptations of books, the boys have to read the books first before I allow them to watch the movies. And so he had to finish The Hobbit, Fellowship, Two Towers, and Return of the King before we even started the first movie. Like it's a rule that I have. I've done the same thing with the Harry Potter books in movies as well. So he just finished the whole series. And then my oldest son was back for college, and so over Thanksgiving weekend we binged all 3 movies and watched the extended cut. 4 hours, 4.5 hour movies.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
So I mean, I love the stories. When I read them. I was introduced to them a little bit later. I was in college. I think when the movies were kind of coming out is when I finally read them. But I appreciate and hear what you're saying in terms of just how these stories become these vehicles of conveying messages that we connect with, like what is good, what is evil, how do we combat this, how do these characters, how do we resonate with these characters in a way that is uplifting and not something that just kind of tears us down.
Yeah.
So Melissa, anything you want to add to that? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Alex is definitely the better storyteller.
Okay, well, you are also an amazing. I mean, no, you're just being humble. You're being humble.
Yeah, no, praise the Lord. That's great. So, so back to like what you're talking about with regards to the Saints Alive, and you said your mom introduced the concept of radio theater and doing that as a podcast. I mean, I've been introduced to a few other podcasts that do kind of similar concepts. I think the first one I was introduced to was the Story Pirates. I don't know if you know, that's kind of a secular one.
I've heard of that.
Yeah,
it's a fun one. They're fun, and they have like a set crew of actors that they all interchange, every week, or however often they release the show. And then another one that Jude listens to is one called Greeking Out, and it's like Greek mythology kind of done in this kind of radio theater type of way. So as the wheels were kind of churning for you, like what made you say like, oh, I can do this? And how did that first kind of script kind of play itself out as you were kind of entertaining those ideas and landing on Saints Alive?
Yeah, I mean, a large, like what we talked about, I mean, we kept coming back to this idea that like Jesus was a storyteller, and he's already written the most beautiful, epic, adventurous, unbelievable. I mean, like Jude was saying, like, how the heck was Padre Pio in the sky? Like the best stories are out there, and we need to tell them well. And honestly, too, I mean, initially it was kind of a budget thing, like, oh, we can't have a movie or that kind of an option for storytelling. But the more that we've gotten into this, the more we've really been convicted that kids and families in particular need an outlet away from screens. And
like
I agree. And I'll just interject right there. I'll say, as a consumer of your podcast, as a that's actually one of the reasons why we do listen to it. It's easy for Jude, who just kind of came in, to be able to say, well, here, take the iPad, go up to your room and listen. And he can listen while he's kind of playing with Legos or doing something. We homeschool the younger two. We homeschool up to high school. And so when Kristen's doing something with the older one, he'll be kind of listening and doing some work as well. And so that's why we have a few different podcasts and audiobooks and things like that, where screen's off, but he can be listening and engaged with the story, but then still be able to do something else. So I would say as somebody who consumes your medium, your podcast, I would say, if it was a TV show, I'm not sure if he would be listening to as many episodes, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that was something that we realized in the midst of it, because we are new parents as well. And like we're seeing the trajectory of, technology and culture and entertainment, and just being like, whoa, like we can't stay on the screens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We have to get off them. And especially for young kids who, like, the screens today are just so saturated with like spoon feeding them like crazy colors and images, and like it's basically taking all of their imaginary muscles away from them. And so we really wanted to make something that would really help kids like use their imaginations. And like the first episode,
to go back, it's funny because when we first started, I just wanted to be that supportive wife, and I just wanted to push Alex and Tanner, and I'm hyper organized, and I'm like, do you know what? I will just organize everything.
Hyper organized is also not. She is more than hyper organized.
That's hyper organized is an understatement. Is that what you just said?
It's a little bit like of a vice because I get a little ridiculous about it. But I was like, you know what? I'll keep them on track. I'll keep them on a schedule. I'll hold them accountable. And then I started working on the St. Nicholas script, and I really became so passionate about this project. And I'm like, I don't know why, because I'm a pediatric nurse and I love my job. And I'm like, I mean, I am not an actor. I'm not I don't know what is going on right now. And it took a friend pointing out to me. She was like, well, aren't you a pediatric nurse? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, then you love to help kids. Like you're helping. This is just an extension of that. Yeah. And just, on a personal level, the number of kids that were admitted to the hospital with very severe depression from screens and from just diabolical stories that they had heard through TV shows or whatever it was, it's just baffling. Like, you hear like statistics and things like that, but every single week I had a shift with a child that had tried to take their own life.
Oh my goodness. And
it was mind-boggling to me. And every time there was a phone in their hand, whether they were 7 or 10 or 18, and so that's really what it got like the fire under me. And I was like, we have to do this, and we have to do this really well. And we have to pour everything into this. So St. Nicholas is kind of where like that fire got lit and hasn't gone out yet.
No, yeah. And
was that coincidental to make St. Nicholas be your first, or was that intentional? Since that was like the patron of the kids,
That was intentional because, well, just by the timeline of how long we started, like our first discussions in July, and it really took about like 4 months.
Yeah.
It took like 4 months to kind of figure out, okay, what is this going to be? And okay, we want to do radio drama. Okay, who are we going to start with? How much time do we have to get our first episode done? And by that time, we're like, we really wanted to start as soon as we could. And December was around the corner. It was like, well, why don't we do St. Nicholas? Because Christmas, and let's actually tell his story so people know it. It's actually very interesting. And we just, luckily from there, like people had natural interest and it just exploded. And we've gotten, it was getting St. Nicholas written was a process because we didn't really know our style. Well, we knew working filmmaker, I was like, I know we can structure the story, but like we don't know what our style necessarily is yet. And we really wanted to land on this, like, okay, we had a lot of internal debates about, are these going to be stories that are historically set in that time versus are we going to take some kind of modern vernacular and just inject that into the story? And that was definitely wrestled a lot within St. Nicholas, but what we've settled on is we really want to transport people to that time. And kids can understand high language, your son reading Lord of the Rings, is a perfect example of that. We just always underestimate what they can understand. And so we really wanted to play into that and be like, let's actually transport them as much as we can. We take some creative liberties here and there, but yeah, that was some of the process for St. Nicholas.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, so a couple thoughts. I mean, my mind's kind of going to different places here, but something I think you guys are saying that I really want to kind of highlight is the need to safeguard our imagination and the need to cultivate, to fill our minds with good stories. And I think sometimes that's underestimated. And even as an adult, I'll say, even for myself, it's like, well, I can watch an R-rated movie and have nothing, I'm not telling people they can't watch R-rated movies but there is something to be said about the things that we allow to enter into their mind and the things that we allow to because we end up thinking about these stories, regardless of where we stand. And so just raising a caution against that, and encouraging people to make sure that the stories that they're filling themselves with are stories that are uplifting. Not that everything has to be like happy-go-lucky and positive, whatever, but there's a lot of darkness that's out there. And there are a lot of stories that like people have encouraged me over the years to watch. And I know some of these shows are good. I don't want to disparage anything, but my work as a therapist, like I have a real sensitivity to like shows that are really like really gruesome or dark and gritty. I'm like, I live in that world. You know what I mean? Like I listen, like I hear a lot of stories of people's like real troubles and difficulties and trauma and all this stuff that I'm like, by the time I get to like wanting to watch a movie, I don't want to watch that in a movie. Like, I don't want to be thinking of like these fictional characters as I would as my clients. Like I need fantasy, or I need something that's kind of disconnected a little bit. But that's me. That's my life. So the importance of kind of safeguarding our imagination and making sure that the things that we enter into our imagination are things that are uplifting. Not that everything has to be Christian or Catholic specifically, but that there are things that are moving us in uplifting us, in a certain way. So I think that's one. And the second thing that I really appreciate that you guys are saying, even specifically with regards to imagination in young children, is to not dismiss the fact that their imagination and their capacities are very active. And so to give them a medium where they have to think through the characters and what they can look like and what those conversations can play that out in their mind, I think is beautiful. And that's actually going back to like the reason why in our house that we have this rule that we don't watch the movie adaptation until we've read the book, because I didn't want, with the Lord of the Rings specifically, I didn't want Peter Jackson's interpretation of the story to influence my son's imagination. I wanted his imagination to run wild with what he thought that the Shire would look like, or what he thought Rivendell would look like, or what he thought the battles would look like, or the ring wraiths would look like. I wanted his imagination to kind of, go into those spaces and entertain those thoughts and not be influenced by the director's, kind of version of that. And I know he did. And unfortunately now, he got an iPad and he Google searched like ring rates and he'd see what they'd look like. So maybe it's a mute point, but no, it's not. I would say even in that circumstance, no, it's not, because he would compare his thoughts to his. And then when we watched the movies, I said, so what was better? And he said, the books. He said the books that, but just again, so I hear what you guys are saying is that there's intentionality, behind that and kind of holding on to this medium and in that space. So,
yeah. And I think, something that we came back to is like, why are the Chronicles of Narnia timeless? Like, is it because, is it just the story, or is it the fact that like, there's so much more? It's so much deeper than like the surface story, right? And the language that he used to tell that story is so beautiful that it's continued to captivate audiences. So we're never going to get to it, but we're trying to be C.S. Lewis.
Trying to be C.S. Lewis for Radio John.
Yeah.
Or Tolkien too. And also just like to go back to your other point about like, watching what we put into our minds. I have a very, like, my mind is a sponge. Like once they get in there, it's really difficult. So I'm very wary of those super dark shows and things like that. It helps as an actor to be able to like just watch something and I can see it and see that scene, but like it's also just like it can be very detrimental to my piece too. And I also don't think it's good that we become numb to darkness. I think that's a dangerous sign for a culture. And I just have I'm still unpacking like some of my philosophy about entertainment, but I definitely think that, like,
Free
entertainment.
associate on the show. You keep go.
I definitely think, like, entertainment at its root should uplift us to think about God, to think about things bigger and better than us, to lift us out of our circumstances, wherever we may be. That doesn't mean that stories can't go into dark places. I mean, we're telling stories about martyrs some of the time. Saint Joan of Arc's story is very difficult, and at the end of the day, she is martyred. But what all of the saint stories have in common is the uplifting to God. Is them sacrificing themselves for God and his love for us. They're examples, they're mirrors of his love. And I think that in every story there should be some form of that, because life is hard. Like, life is really hard. You as a therapist know that. You're having all of the people that are really like, they're bearing out all of those things very clearly for you. But we all carry that, whether or not we're talking that out to a therapist. And so I think that storytelling is so important to help us deal with that, and then to also uplift it in some way.
I feel like we're talking about the title of your podcast right now. Isn't it about always having hope?
That's it. You got it. You beat me to the punch, man. I was just about to segue to that, but that's exactly right. That is the name of the show, Always Hope. And exactly for that reason, is that there is a darkness, there is a nihilism that exists in modern culture, and we have to be sensitive to it. And so, like, when I take the kids to the movies and we watch a show or something, unfortunately nowadays we have to be we're very proactive in terms of filtering out, because not only with this darkness, but there's also other political agendas that are making their way, into younger and younger stories, where they weren't even present in younger stories. And now it's like the last few Disney movies, unfortunately, I just haven't I haven't been able to take my kids to go see because of the agenda that's being pushed in it. And then that agenda, unfortunately, infiltrates the story as well. Like, the stories themselves aren't even that good, because you always have to make decisions when you're in a creative process of, is the focus going to be the story itself, or is the focus going to be a message, and the focus going to be an agenda? And sometimes this is the knock against some of the earlier Christian films, which I know they're getting a little bit better with this, but the knock against them was that the message, the agenda of preaching the gospel was superseding the story itself. And so the story was kind of at times shallow or flat, in that regard. And we're kind of in some ways seeing, I think, a similar thing happening on kind of the liberal side, where it's like this agenda has taken primacy, and how do we get certain characters in certain moments in certain places. Well, when you take energy to think about how you're going to do that, that's taking energy and creativity away from the larger narrative that you're trying to tell. And so what becomes more important, the narrative or the agenda to have to get these certain pieces in? And so you're seeing this kind of happening now, is that the stories themselves aren't as engaging and aren't as depth, because the story is beholden to a certain criteria that it has to kind of fit within.
Right.
And so we have to be, as parents, we have to be cautious about that, and making sure that we're just, if we're seeing those agendas, talking to our kids and educating them, and helping them to be able to start, sift through that stuff themselves. So.
Yeah. Sorry, we had a little peanut gallery wanting to talk about that too over here. But,
all right, Mia's getting fired up about it.
It's getting fired up. Yeah, his fires are up too. But yeah, that is it's very needed today. And like, that was also something that, when we were in OSV, that was something that really, like, we realized that we, as storytellers today, that are, we're telling stories to Catholics, but we're also getting, even like non-Catholics that like our podcast.
Awesome.
And what we were, realizing is like, okay, like, what are we getting at? Like, what is the kind of the undercurrents in our culture right now that is like, that we need to, like, fight against? And it is that, these stories, the saint stories, the stories of the saints, like, they are written by much better writers. Like, they're God, like, God wrote these stories, and the church, just out of, her grace and wisdom, was able to collect them and has, documented them. Mm-hmm. But we're just doing our best to tell them, and so I think at the end of the day, like there's some of the best stories that, go beyond all of this, and really get down to, what is beauty, and, who is God, and how do we live for him in our lives.
Yeah. Anything you want to add? I can see, I know you got the baby going there, Melissa, but is there anything else you want to add to this?
Well, I was just thinking, I don't know, the problem with having an agenda behind the story, and either way, like you were saying, like some of the earlier Christian films, it limits the story so much. And I don't know, the stories of these saints really can't be filed away into like one box. Like I think for a while I was like, okay, this one is, it has this virtue, and then it's like, no, but like there, every saint struggled, every saint was a sinner, every saint had it's just these epic adventures that you just can't confine to like a one word virtue for that saint, or something like that. And I think that one of the most beautiful things about all of this has been that we've really felt the saints by our side guiding us with their stories, because a lot of the time, I mean, I have an outline that I think of, and then it's like, oh my gosh, this is where the story needs to go. And we pray to them as we write. And I don't know, we're just grateful for their help, because there's no way this would be what it is. Well, we would never have it to begin with. But yeah.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah.
Well, as you guys produce the shows, the question that Jude was asking, and I'm going to ask the same question, is how much creative license do you take, and where do you entertain the idea between, okay, what needs to be historically accurate and entering people into that space, and what becomes, okay, we need characters to be vehicle pieces to kind of move the story along. How do you kind of navigate that as you're kind of working with each story?
It kind of comes down to how much we know about the saint. So like Saint Valentine, it's almost all legend. So that one we had, there were lots of legends that we took creative liberty with. But then I just did St. Charles Borromeo, and he's one of the most well-documented saints. Every character in that story existed. And we always try to find as much dialogue, as many real quotes, like as historically accurate as we can make it, we do it. Because we always just find that the truth is better than anything we could make up. Yeah,
the only thing that we kind of, like in St. Padre Pio is a good example of it, would be like, how are we going to actually like, get into the story? So we use we use a narrator, I'm the narrator. But we also do try to be creative sometimes in how we actually fall into stories, just to experiment so for example, St. Padre Pio, like the narrator is technically a grandfather, right? And, he wasn't, which he technically is like the grown-up version of that pilot, but we don't
know if he had a granddaughter named
we don't know if he
Mary.
had a granddaughter named Mary or anything like that.
I don't think they got ice cream after school.
They could have. And then the other episode that we did
probably would have been gelatos, I guess.
Right.
Italian.
The other episode that we did that was St. Thomas More, but we try to use his writings as much as possible. So a lot of that narration is kind of pulled from his writings of himself. So we try, it really comes down to how much documentation can we find. And most times it doesn't take much creative license to make these stories epic.
Sure, because they're epic in their own right. And that's what you guys have been saying the whole time. So great to know. So what's next? You guys, what's the plan with the OSV Challenge money? Is it to continue creating the podcast as you're doing it? Is there idea of creating fictional pieces? Doing your own version of the Lord of the Rings, own fantasy storytelling, epic adventure that is not tied specifically to a saint? Like where are the wheels churning for you guys?
So right now, I mean, we've kind of had just with COVID and then a baby and still keeping up with production of Saints Alive. We've kind of had to like put it on hold. We're going to go to the Focus Seed Conference in January, which we're really excited about. But kind of all of the above. We only see Saints Alive growing with Saints episodes. We're hoping to churn out more, but we also have a couple really exciting new content pieces in the works, and it's just coming down to which one do we land on. We have our merchandise shop launching, and so a lot of things in the air, but we're also just continuing to have conversations with the mentors that we've made, and just because we really want it's success for not just ourselves, but we just want to keep telling these stories and keep expanding and growing. So I don't know, like all things in life, I'm not completely sure, but we're excited.
Yeah, we'll leave you with a tease that there are some really exciting ideas.
Yeah. Just got to land on
We got to
one.
land on one. One of our, one of the things that we're really, just working on is Saints Alive. Like, yeah, Saints Alive is just the beginning, and we are just trying to figure out, okay, so how do we grow this platform naturally so that way, the audience that we're serving is continue to be served, and how do we help expand it also to stay really focused? I feel like a lot of times when something's successful, it's just like, okay, well, now we're going to do all these other things,
Right?
And
Right.
we are very disciplined in what we develop and what we want to do next, and so we're still going through all those conversations.
Yeah. Another big thing is we're unwilling to cut corners when it comes to quality.
Yeah.
And so it's like 150 hours per episode.
That's a lot.
For the three of us.
Yeah.
And so what we have been able to do is hire an assistant editor and some assistant writers just to help us, I don't know, stop doggy paddling water and get out and start like being able to look at what we're making and go from there. So we're really grateful. I mean, people are always reaching out to try to help us, and we have voice actors from now all over the world who have contributed.
Awesome.
One thing I can say that I really do hope we were able to do is like, I'm very interested in like, how do we as, Catholics and creatives, like how do we develop some sort of form of like creative philosophy? Because I think like, that is something that there's so many different pockets right now, and I've been through a lot of them, and I don't really think that any specific one is like kind of getting it. Like, how do we put our Catholicism together in creativity? I think there's a lot of infighting with that, and some unhelpful ways of thinking about it. So I hope that the success of Saints Alive, hopefully we as a team start to figure that out for ourselves, and hopefully can also share that with others.
Yeah, praise the Lord. Yeah, that's good. It's good to be reflecting on these questions and how do we think about the creative process and how the creative process can be a path of holiness. And it really is. I mean, I believe that. I mean, I think it's, I say this in some of my talks on work, that work existed before the fall. And we have to remember that, that it's not just a product of the fall. Like this capacity to co-create with God, to take what he's given, that's what Adam does. He tills and he names, he organizes, he's a scientist, he's doing the work, he's gardener, and his fingerprints are all over the Garden of Eden. I mean, think about that, right? Like Adam's fingerprints and creativity is engaged in the Garden of Eden as he's bringing order to it. So I'm in agreement. I think that there's ripe, there's room for thought there in terms of being able to develop that further. So kudos to you guys, as you guys continue to embark on this journey, and congrats again on the podcast and the success of it. Congrats on winning the challenge. I think that's a tremendous opportunity there. And so people want to listen to the show. Best way, do you have a preferred platform, or can you not say that? Should you not play favorites?
Well, no, anywhere people listen to podcasts, you can go listen to us. We're listed on all the major ones. Apple, Spotify, Google.
Yeah. And then we have some fun things on our website too. So we have like saint resources and discussion questions and things like that.
We also have a lot of we also try and feature a lot of the actors that we work with, and we're trying to also foster that. So please go check them out too, as we work with a lot of amazing people. There's so many things that have to go right for these episodes to be made. And one of the main things is the actors. So, we try and feature them as much as we can. So there's a lot of great stuff on our website. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And we'll be launching our shop there soon for the art around the episodes. So that's very exciting.
Yeah. Fantastic. We'll have links to the podcast and to the website in the show notes. And last question I ask all my first time guests, Alex and Melissa, what gives you guys hope?
Oh man, my kids. We were just talking about this last night. We went to the Shrine of Divine Mercy yesterday, and sorry, and it's in Stockbridge, Mass, and it was like a really gloomy, overcast day, and I don't know, there were diapers that needed to be changed at the wrong time, and we tried to find lunch somewhere, and everywhere was closed. but we just looked at our 2-year-old and he was so excited. I mean, just so filled with joy. He's like hopping down the sidewalk because he saw a Christmas light. And we were like, oh my gosh, we've got to be more like him, except for the irrationality part. But yeah, his joy is just so infectious.
Yeah. No, he's hard to beat when it comes to what gives me hope.
Yeah.
I'm going to be really just basic and just say, like, Jesus' love displayed on the crucifix. Like, whenever I am really struggling, I just remember, like, God on the crucifix for me. And I know that, like, in all of my struggles, that no matter how bad I messed up, God still gave his son for me, and that I still need a hope, and move forward with that.
Amen. Well, great answers, guys. Thank you both for answering that and sharing beautifully again, just the life of faith that you have, and your love for each other and your love for your kids, and God repaying that to you. So praise the Lord. Thanks, guys, very much for joining me on the podcast. Again, many blessings to you as you continue the great work that you're doing. So
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Well, dear listener, that does it for another great episode. Thank you so much for hanging there all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this episode, then please share it with somebody that you know. If you think people need to know about the Saints Alive podcast, you have friends of yours who want to know more about the show, then this is a great episode to pass along to them. So with great gratitude to Alex and Melissa for joining me on the podcast, and for Jude and his little planned, it was totally staged interruption. I was so happy to have him on the show. And actually from that, I will share that one of the recent episodes that they had just come out with St. John Bosco, featuring St. John Bosco, Jude actually, as a result of this interview, was invited to be part of that podcast. And so we got him all mic'd up and recorded some lines, and he's on that show. So I can give a little plug to my son, Jude. Now, as you finish this episode, check that one out. St. John Bosco Part 1 just came out middle of January. It's a great episode, and a little cameo to a little shout out, I should say, to my son, who has a few lines in the podcast. So thanks so much, everybody. God bless you. Have a great day.